A few months ago, I was reading an online piece, Final Fantasy Remasters Reignite Controversies over Pixel Art. The article discussed remasters or new editions of video games originally released in the 1980s and 90s. I greatly enjoyed playing the Final Fantasy series when I was younger. In the decades since, there's been a market for these games to be released on current systems. These newer systems are significantly more powerful than the technology available when the games were originally released decades ago. Game designers have often taken advantage of the more powerful technology to make the graphics fancier. Many people love the aesthetics of the pixel art they grew up with and don't like the changes. The article I mentioned described one particular earlier remake as having nightmarish updates that are so objectively awful to look at. It's certainly worth discussing the merits, or lack thereof, of changing the image quality, aesthetics, and style of art. But beyond that, there's something we need to consider beyond the different technological capabilities between now and back in the day. That same pixel art can look substantially different on the screens of today versus years past. Modern LCD screens make everything look clean and crisp. Older CRT screens had a fuzzy and crunchy look, with a grid that covered the screen. Sure, the newer screens look really clean, and it's fun to see the individual pixels, but there's a certain depth that the imperfections of the older screens brings out. How should designers reconcile those differences? If you work with education, this is probably the part of the video where you're wondering what any of this has to do with anything. For the video game designers, the screen display and the technological capabilities change. What, if anything, do they update, and why? Now, let's apply this to education. Let's say you're moving from face-to-face to online teaching. In a face-to-face class, depending on the teacher and the students that term, class discussions can happen naturally. The teacher asks a question, the students respond, and, hey, best case scenario, everyone leaves the classroom wiser and inspired. As the graphics on the new screen might not have the same depth as the old screen, online discussion posts with structure often found in the face-to-face class likely won't have the same depth as the in-person class discussion. So, you need to make some decisions on designing the online discussion. What is the prompt? How long do the students' written answers need to be? Should they be including links to supporting sources or media? How should they respond to their peers? How is the discussion graded? How does this activity tie into the goals of the course? The modern video game designer can add all sorts of graphic details. Maybe they even try to capture the aesthetics of those older screens. Similarly, we can add all sorts of details to give students a clear expectation of what's expected of them in the online discussion and to help generate meaningful discussions. Perhaps in the face-to-face class, there were built-in opportunities to talk with your students about the progress of their papers, and perhaps you're now teaching in an online learning space that makes that a little more cumbersome. Well, you can design that student paper so that students are submitting less daunting chunks at a time. A proposal, an outline, an annotated bibliography, a paragraph, multiple drafts, and so you can build opportunities to communicate on their progress right into those assignments. So I've enjoyed geeking out on how video games might change when the setting changes, and we've looked at a few ways on how your teaching might change when the modality changes. So what are some of your favorite strategies on adapting the learning environment when the modality changes? I've included a link to the Association for Distance Education and Independent Learning's LinkedIn discussion page. I'd love to hear your ideas, your strategies, what you've done before, and what you're thinking about trying. I hope you can join the discussion. In the meantime, happy lifelong learning, everybody.